top stories, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said Blinken's visit to Ethiopia will take Ethiopia-US diplomatic relations to new heights. And Czech Republic expresses commitment to renew its bilateral cooperation with Ethiopia in many fields. Hello and thank you for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour. With the news, I'm Tabitha John. Stay with us. The United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken has concluded his one-day visit to Ethiopia. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demek Emekonnen bid farewell to the Secretary of State today at the Addis Ababa Bole International Airport. During his one-day visit to Ethiopia, the State Secretary met with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and discussed domestic, regional and bilateral issues of mutual concern with a commitment for enhancing the partnership between Ethiopia and the United States. Antony Blinken has also held discussions with African Union Commissioner Musa Faki Mahamat. Quote unquote, I was pleased to receive U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the AU headquarters during his working visit to Ethiopia, the commissioner tweeted. He also said that they exchanged views regarding progress in the implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement and other regional issues of mutual interest. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken praised the Ethiopian government and Tigrayan leadership for the cessation of hostilities, reiterating that the United States is still the biggest bilateral donor to Ethiopia. The secretary announced that Washington will add to that total. Briefing the media at the Ras Mekonnen Hall of the Addis Ababa University on Wednesday, Blinken voiced optimism at preserving peace on his second stopover to Ethiopia next to Niger. On the latest trip by a senior U.S. official to Africa, as China and Russia make inroads on the continent, Blinken offered $331 million in new humanitarian aid, but stopped short of backing Ethiopia's readmission to the major trade pact. Our staff reporter, Binyam Alemayo, attended the event and has the following story.
The top U.S. diplomat said greater economic relations with Ethiopia depended on its commitment to both reconciliation and accountability over the war, which the U.S. estimates had cost about 600,000 lives. He met for an unusually long 2.5 hours with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, while also conferring with representatives of the TPLF, and said that both sides voiced commitments to implementing the November 2 peace accord brokered in South Africa by the African Union with the U.S. support.
The cessation of hostilities agreement is a major achievement and step forward, saving lives, changing lives. The guns are silent. As the fighting has stopped, human rights violations have declined. Humanitarian assistance is flowing and finally reaching nearly all communities in need. Services are being restored in the Tigray region. The TPLF is disarming. Eritrean and other non-federal forces are departing. The dedicated diplomacy of mediators from the African Union, from Kenya, from South Africa, supported by the United States, was essential to securing this agreement.
He also held talks with human rights groups and said they had reported a very significant drop in human rights violations and abuses in Tigray since the agreement. He nevertheless cautioned that this doesn't mean that they have been eliminated, urging all parties to the conflict to do everything possible to ensure that they cease entirely. PM Abiy wrote on Twitter that he agreed with him to strengthen long-standing bilateral relations between our countries with a commitment to partnership. Blinken announced new humanitarian assistance worth more than $331 million to Ethiopia, which is also grappling with a record drought in its southern and southeastern regions. The new aid, which brings total U.S. humanitarian assistance to Ethiopia to more than $780 million in the U.S. fiscal year of 2023, is intended for everyone not one group or region, Blinken told reporters.
Today, I announced an additional $331 million in emergency food and humanitarian assistance that will reach billions of people, millions of Ethiopians affected by conflict, affected by drought.
Blinken said that with peace taking hold, Ethiopia is moving in the right direction, and the U.S. shares its aspirations, but is not yet ready to welcome its back to the U.S. trade program known as the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. AGOA, a preferential trade agreement, allows some African business duty-free access to U.S. markets. Ethiopia was removed from AGOA at the beginning of 2022.
Ethiopia has clear benchmarks for a pathway toward reinstatement, and the administration, we will continue to work closely with the government to achieve that objective, which we share. And as I noted earlier, with the cessation of hostilities agreement, and particularly with its implementation, that's extremely important in moving down that path. And my hope and expectation is that will continue.
Ethiopia has time and again reiterated that its delisting from the AGOA trade agreement is a politically motivated decision on the part of Washington.
The United States has launched a $331 million joint emergency operation to be implemented over 5 years in Ethiopia. The new investment, named Joint Emergency Operation, was announced today in the presence of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. During the official launch of the support to be implemented through the USAID, the Secretary of State announced that in addition to providing various urgent supports to Ethiopia, the United States will also support Ethiopia's efforts to become food self-sufficient by increasing its productivity. Johannes Fentaun has the following account.
The United States has announced a $331 million program for humanitarian assistance to citizens who are in need in Ethiopia. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is on an official visit to Ethiopia, announced the emergency operation, which will last for 5 years and will be implemented by USAID. While announcing the program, Blinken stated that U.S. is providing various support to Ethiopia and informed the support will be used for people in need of humanitarian assistance in 9 of the 11 regions of Ethiopia.
Today, I can share that we're going to be providing an additional $331 million in assistance through this joint emergency operations program to try to reach more people in Ethiopia who are in need of food security, and we think we'll reach another 13 million or so people being affected by drought in particular. Besides being enduring, what's so important is that it's intended for everyone in Ethiopia.
The Secretary of State added that in addition to the urgent support, the United States will support Ethiopia's effort to alleviate food insecurity by maximizing productivity.
As vital, as necessary, as urgent as this assistance is, we're equally committed to working closely with our partners in Ethiopia to help them develop and strengthen their own productive capacity. That ultimately is the most important thing that we can do, because I'm convinced, we're convinced, that in Ethiopia and many other partner countries in Africa, it's that long-term productive capacity that can be resilient to things like droughts, like climate change, like disease.
Minister of Finance Ahmed Shide, for his part, reminded that Ethiopia and the United States have a strong bilateral relations spanning centuries and thanked the people and government of the United States for their coordinated support to Ethiopia.
Today, on the occasion of the launch of this USAID's new 5-year joint emergency operation program in the presence of Your Excellency, we would like to share our deep gratitude to the United States government and the American people for their continued commitment in supporting our country's address the urgent humanitarian challenges which affected the most vulnerable. I acknowledge and sincerely appreciate that in 2022 alone, the U.S. provided more than $1.7 billion to respond to humanitarian needs driven by the crisis in the northern Ethiopia and the severe drought in pastoral areas in southern and southeastern Ethiopia.
Ahmed Shide added, despite challenging factors, Ethiopia has devised various strategies to get rid of the problems it is facing and achieving progress, and the U.S. support will help Ethiopia to achieve its plan quickly.
The spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Mellis Alam, said that the U.S. Secretary of State's visit to Ethiopia will usher in a new era of collaboration in mutual diplomatic ties. The spokesperson also told the media that the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, praised Ethiopia's determination to carry out the agreement reached in Pretoria and Nairobi in order to end the North's crisis peacefully. Kasaun Chani has more details.
The spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Ambassador Mellis Alam, briefed the media on Ethiopia's main diplomatic activities for the week. According to Ambassador Mellis' comment, the visit of United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Ethiopia will elevate relations between the two countries.
ውጭ ጉዳይ ሚኒስትሩ ጉብኝት የኢትዮጵያና አሜሪካ ወዳጅነት
The United States Secretary of State's visit is a sign that relations between the two nations will flourish. According to the Secretary of State, his visit to Ethiopia raised three fundamental concerns. The first is to engage in a consultative dialogue with senior Ethiopian government officials regarding Ethiopia's internal affairs. The second is about issues pertaining to regional integration. And the third is to solidify diplomatic ties between the two countries and ensure sustainable development between them.
ወደ ተሻለ ደረጃ እንዲያድግ በሚችልበት ሁኔታ ላይ ለመምከር እንደሆነ ተናግረዋል.
The spokesperson added that the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken commended the Ethiopian government's commitment to put the agreements made in Pretoria and Nairobi into effect in order to bring about a long-term peaceful resolution to the crisis in the north.
የሰላም ሂደቱ ያለበትን ሁኔታ ለመረዳት
The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit also provided a wealth of opportunities to know about the reality of the Ethiopian peace process on the ground. According to what the Secretary of State said, America has become exceedingly pleased with the peace process that is taking place and for its implementation. His government has vowed to support Ethiopia's government all the more.
Ambassador Mellis also pinpointed that Blinken appreciated Ethiopia's efforts to combat terrorism in the area and that the United States would continue to support those efforts while cooperating with the Ethiopian government to eradicate them.
ሶስተኛው የቀጠናዊ ጉዳይ ነው. የአሜሪካ መንግስትና የኢትዮጵያ መንግስት ለበርካታ ዓመታት በአፍሪካ ቀንድ ሰላምና ደህንነት ጉዳይ በጋራ ይሰራሉ. አሸባሪነትን ከመዋጋት የባህር ላይ ወንብድናን ከመዋጋት
The third of the region's difficulties relates to further stabilizing the peace and security problems. The governments of Ethiopia and America have long collaborated closely on maintaining the peace and stability of the region. They have been engaged in efforts to combat terrorism, illegal human trafficking, maritime-related concerns and other issues. This visit has made sure that the Ethiopian government's efforts to combat terrorism in the area are successful. The Secretary of State also lauded Ethiopia's efforts to maintain peace and security in South Sudan, Somalia and other enormous contributions in Sudan.
ስምምነት የሰላም ሀዲዱን ወጥቶ እንዳይሄድ የምናደርገው ጥረት ሱዳን ውስጥ ያለውን ችግር ለመፍታት የምናደርገውን አስተዋጽኦ ባለቤቶቹ ሱዳናውያን ቢሆኑም እነዚህ ነገሮች ሁሉ በበጎ የሚታዩ ጉዳዮች እንደሆኑ ገልጸውልናል.
Diplomatic ties between Ethiopia and the United States of America were established in 1903.
Welcome to the land of origins. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia is pleased to serve all your traveler banking needs. If you have money from any of these 16 countries, you can convert it to local currency by visiting our nearest branch. Alternatively, our secure Forex ATMs accept cash exchange, or if you prefer using your cards, we've partnered with Visa, MasterCard, and UnionPay so that you can withdraw cash from our local ATMs or make cashless transactions at thousands of local POS partners securely and with confidence. We are linked with more than 700 global banks through our direct SWIFT address, CBE Teta. We also work with 16 international money transfer agents, out of which Tune and World Remit enable you to make direct deposits into our savings and current accounts or our popular CBE Burr mobile wallet. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, the bank you can always rely on.
Welcome back. The Ministry of Justice remarked that Ethiopia's national transitional justice policy is crucial to establishing long-lasting peace, justice and reconciliation. The State Minister for Justice, Alamanta Aggedaw, says that the African Union and the government jointly held a two-day discussion session in Addis Ababa to gather information regarding the national transitional justice policy, including several international entities. The State Minister added that the government is committed to implementing this strategy and those conversations with various parties are being made to raise resources for it. Alamanta said that the government is very much committed to this and qualified experts are working to prepare a policy that is in line with the African Union's transitional justice policy and takes the Ethiopian context into account, noting that the process of transitional justice will be of great benefit in solving the challenges that Ethiopia has faced over the years. It has been learned that the process of transitional justice would encompass everyone, legal accountability, justice, reconciliation, and reparation, and would be carried out in accordance with Ethiopia's historical, cultural, and spiritual context. The Czech Republic expresses interest to strengthen economic cooperation with Ethiopia. The first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Czech Republic, Jiří Kozák, said that his country wants to increase relations with Ethiopia in agriculture, water development, youth empowerment, and geological sectors. The first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs held talks with State Minister of Finance, Samarita Sawasaw, in Addis Ababa. During the discussion, he said that the Czech Republic development support to Ethiopia has not been disrupted due to the war in Ukraine and Russia and the price of inflation that followed it. He explained that the Czech Republic's relationship with Ethiopia has been given the highest priority in the New Africa program that the country launched last year. State Minister of Finance, Samarita Sawasaw, on her part, stated that Ethiopia's relationship with the Czech Republic is strong. She appreciated the contributions made by the government of the Czech Republic to increase the production of banana in South Ethiopia and other development supports. Samarita pointed out that companies of the Czech Republic will be beneficial if they invest in Ethiopia in various sectors by using the economic reforms being carried out in the country. In a related story, the Czech Republic expresses commitment to renew bilateral relations with Ethiopia in many fields. Talking to ETV, Miroslav Kosek, the ambassador of Czech Embassy in Addis Ababa, underscored his country is determined to renew cooperation in many fields by adapting new strategies with Africa. The first deputy minister at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, Jiří Kozák, for his part, indicates that the Czech Republic is determined to strengthen relations with Ethiopia and the AU partners in many fields. Shagao Yamato has more.
The Czech Republic and Ethiopia have long-standing relations in many areas. Currently, Czechia is supporting Ethiopia in different sectors, including water, nutrition, agriculture, education, and among others. Talking to ETV, Miroslav Kosek, the ambassador of Czech in Addis Ababa, indicates his country's commitment to renew bilateral relations with Ethiopia in many fields that have been affected by COVID-19 and internal conflict.
We need some more time just to, renew our bilateral cooperations in many fields, which was somehow interrupted first by COVID, and then with the internal problems, internal conflict in Ethiopia. And after the peace agreement, it's open again, and we are prepared to be engaged as much as possible here. Our government just adopted a few months ago a new strategy for Africa, and within this strategy, Ethiopia is one of the most important partners. And maybe another example that Ethiopia is a very important partner for Czech Republic, for Czechia, is that Ethiopia is the top country for our development cooperation.
The first deputy minister at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, Yuri Kozak, for his part said Czechia is determined to cooperate with Ethiopia and African countries in security, economic and education sectors.
Now Czechia is committed to cooperating with Ethiopian partners as well as other African countries. What we see as a potential field of cooperation is security, economic relations, education is very important, scientific and research relations, cooperation with universities, exchange of students are also very important for us.
He also added that his country is committed to build long-term partnership in investment, infrastructure, military, among others, with Africa based on partnership.
We are here to build a long-term partnership which is based on investment, which is based on cooperation with local communities, which is based on engagement with local people. We are active in many African countries as Czechia. Our companies have invested into building in automotive, in engineering, infrastructure, in military, and this is the way how we want to proceed. We want to have investments, we want to have trade which is built on partnership, which is built on creating skills of local people of African countries, especially here in Ethiopia. We have cooperation in the field of aviation.
The first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Czech Republic, Yuri Kozak, and his delegation met with her Ethiopian officials and EU partners and discussed ways to boost cooperation with African countries.
The UN Economic Commission for Africa said Africa needs to curb poverty and social inequality. Presenting an overview of recent economic and social conditions in Africa at the ongoing 41st meeting of the Committee of Experts in Addis Ababa, Macroeconomic Policy Division Director at ECA, Adam El Harika, stated, quote-unquote, in Africa, growth dwindled from 4.6% in 2021 to 3.6% in 2022. The director added that the COVID-19 pandemic, the Russia-Ukrainian war, and the resultant food and energy hurdles, rising inflation, as well as debt tightening and natural disasters brought some serious developmental challenges on the continent, such as poverty, inequality rates, and lack of decent jobs. According to the ECA, in 2022, an additional 18 million new poor emerged in Africa. The continent had more than half of the highest proportion of the world's poor at 54.8%. The ECA estimates that Africa is anticipated to grow by 4.1% in 2023. However, it might face headwinds, especially with an unfavorable external environment created by the recession in both the United States and the Eurozone, and which are expected to weigh on commodity prices. First Secretary of Somalia Embassy to Ethiopia said Ethiopia and Somalia are strengthening bilateral relations in various fields of cooperation. The Secretary of the Embassy, Mohammed Omar Yariso, accentuated that Ethiopia and Somalia have strong bilateral relations as well as shared common language and culture. Goshu Maliso has more from the Ethiopian News Agency.
Ethiopia and Somalia share a common culture, custom and language beyond being neighborhood. In an exclusive interview with Ethiopian News Agency, First Secretary of Somalia Embassy to Ethiopia, Mohammed Omar Yarso, said Ethiopia and Somalia are strengthening bilateral relations to combat extremism in the region.
We're hoping that Ethiopia can play a very key role in liberation of a lot of Somalia and the stabilization against a lot of extremist groups, but more in terms of the cultural awareness that we share between two countries. So we hope we can enhance it as much as possible, and anything that we can do to support the cause of a greater and more secure and more prosperous Horn of Africa is a benefit for everyone within the region.
The collaboration in maintaining security across the region by leaders of the countries is pivotal, Omar emphasized. Ethiopia is a very key player in terms of green energy and tackling of climate change by planting billions of tree seedlings through the Green Legacy Initiative, Omar said.
Ethiopia is a very key advancer in green energy in terms of cars and electric cars which are being promoted within the country. And we're hoping this will transfer within the greater Horn of Africa and the greater Africa as a whole.
According to him, the Green Legacy Initiative, which have been spreaded by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, is playing a key role within the greater Horn of Africa region. It is to be recalled that the leaders of Ethiopia and Somalia have reaffirmed their commitment to further strengthen cooperation in politics and economy, apart from cooperation in peace and security, during Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed visit to Ethiopia last September.
Zamadina Nigatu, a well-known economist, said Ethiopia should provide more benefit packages to investors to earn foreign currency. He accentuated that the success of wheat production needs to be replicated in any other production items in the agriculture sector. Take a look at the full story.
Ethiopia has prioritized 5 major sectors, namely mining, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing and ICT in its 10-year perspective strategic plan to attract FDI. According to UNCTAD, Ethiopia is the one among the 5 largest FDI recipients in Africa. The International Monetary Fund report revealed that Ethiopia has ranked the 3rd largest economy in sub-Saharan region. However, due to the past conflict in northern Ethiopia and the COVID-19 pandemic, the FDI magnetism has declined by 6% compared to the previous years. Talking to ETV, Zamadina Nigatu said Ethiopia should implement preferred benefit packages to investors in a bid to earn more foreign currency.
By making a lot of reforms in that sector, by incentivizing, for example, artisanal miners and other types of incentives, or inviting big mining companies into the gold, tantalum, potash, and all these other things I think Ethiopia has, and then gas. Recently there was news item, it's certified that Ethiopia has about 7 trillion cubic feet of gas. Okay, that's pretty significant. It's monetizable.
Zamadina underlined that the success of wheat production needs to be replicated in any other production items in agriculture sector to ensure domestic food demands as well as neighboring countries.
You replicate the success of wheat in other agriculture sectors. Okay, Ethiopia actually can export and address the food security needs of these countries, of these neighboring countries, which are pretty close to Ethiopia. So, when we think of agriculture, we need to think broader, in the sense that it can go beyond local consumption, and it could be actually a very significant export generator for Ethiopia. And that's where I think investors can also be engaged. Because they earn hard currency, they address, some of the food security. I mean, in the Gulf, they have plenty of petrodollars, but there's very little they can do about farming the desert.
He also suggested that Ethiopia needs to exploit its untapped tourism potential to create more job opportunities as well as to secure foreign currency.
I think will be a major exciting sector. Now, lots of hotels infrastructure has been built. So I think tourism could also, because it generates not only hard currency, but it can generate millions of jobs. So it has the potential, because there's a lot of countries in Africa who don't even have an airline and have bigger tourist numbers than Ethiopia. So with a coordinated effort, with a strategy focused on promoting that, as is being done now, I think the tourism sector could actually generate jobs and foreign exchange. And for investors, there's a lot of opportunity in that area.
According to Investment Commission, Ethiopia garnered $2.4 billion USD in 9 months.
And finally, Africa's push for global vaccine equity has received a major boost after 6 shipping containers from the Germany-based firm BioNTech arrived in the Rwandan capital, Kigali. The so-called BioNtainers carried materials that can be used to produce up to 50 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines annually and conduct trials on new treatments for malaria, tuberculosis, HIV, and various types of cancer. BioNTech also plans to ship similar containers to Senegal and South Africa. Johannes Ventahun has the full story from the CGTN.
On Monday afternoon, a chartered giant Antonov cargo plane carrying BioNTech's first 6 biotenors touched down at Kigali International Airport. Officials present at the airport applauded its arrival before the first shipping container was loaded onto a waiting cargo truck to be transported to Kigali's industrial park, where the German pharmaceutical company BioNTech is setting up its own manufacturing base. This movement has been described as historic by involved parties and observers.
Like you said, it's not something for Rwanda, it's not something for Africa, it's beyond, it's something for the humanity, so that we are ready for the next pandemic, for the next threat, that we have tools that will help us to stop it. And we should not have tools at one part of the world, we should have it in all parts of the world, especially here where we didn't have solutions and tools when they were needed.
BioNTech's drug manufacturing substance and formulas arrived in Rwanda exactly 3 years since the first case of COVID-19 was detected in the East African country. From that moment, the African Union, through the African Center for Disease Control, embarked on a quest to start making mRNA vaccine in Africa for the first time. Officials say the vaccines produced in the African-wide network will go to people living in the African Union member states and are expected to improve access to better health care across the continent.
So we built this to deploy it very quickly. And I think the first time it even takes a little bit longer, but after that, once the processes are aligned with the African Union and we see that there is a pure vaccine coming out of this and the quality is okay, then I think you can even speed it up for other countries.
For a very long time, Africa has decried unfair distribution of medical technologies and very recently the holding of vaccines during the devastating COVID-19 pandemic season. There is a general feeling that having such infrastructure that is needed throughout the first mRNA vaccines production facility in Africa is a big step in the right direction in the so-called global cooperation. With its state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Kigali, BioNTech believes it can produce up to 50 million vaccine doses per year and also conduct trials on new therapeutics for malaria, tuberculosis, HIV and cancer.
This continent contributes only 2% of the scientific output, especially clinical trials, only 2%. With all the disease burden that we have here, infectious, non-infectious diseases that are preventable, sometimes with vaccines and therapeutics, having this, this setup, this partnership, is going to help close that big gap from 2% maybe to 10% or 20% of research, scientific output from here, from Africa.
For Africa to be better prepared to handle another health crisis, access to equitable technologies in healthcare have been identified as the key enabler to do so. With the arrival of biotech technologies, the African continent and especially people of Kigali believe that the continent is now better prepared to handle any future crisis.
You're watching Addis News Hour. Here's a reminder of the stories making headlines. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs said Blinken's visit to Ethiopia will take Ethiopia-US diplomatic relations to new heights. And Czech Republic expresses commitment to renew its bilateral cooperation with Ethiopia in many fields. And that's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night and take care.